Football 24/7 with John McMullen. It's Eagles postgame. The end of the season comes to a close, and the Eagles end at 4-11-1, and that is not the story of the postgame show tonight. Johnny Mack, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Krause. Obviously didn't end the way the Eagles expected, no doubt. So much excitement, optimism to begin the season. And it ends at 4-11-1. And I don't think anybody thought it would reach those depths. But here we are, and now it shifts to the off season. And first domino's already fallen. The fact that this is, even though the Eagles haven't confirmed it yet, it is Jim Schwartz's last game as the defensive coordinator. And now we got to start talking about Doug Pederson and Carson Wentz, because Doug Pederson is going to be back as the head coach. And it certainly seems as if Carson Wentz does not want to return as the quarterback of this organization.
John McMullen, this was a tough game to watch if you're an Eagles fan. And everybody listening to you, listening to this podcast, is an Eagles fan. People are embarrassed. People are frustrated. People are confused. People have no idea why Doug Pederson pulled Jalen Hurts out of the game when they were still in the game and brought in Nate Sudfeld.
Well, there's only one reason, and you're right. Some people look at it as disgraceful, and I've seen that all over social media and Twitter and so forth, and other people think it was the right thing to do. So I do think you have two camps, and, if you talk about Jason Kelsey, who spoke passionately to us a few weeks ago and told reporters, look, winning games should come above all else in the NFL. You don't want to create this culture of losing by doing things purposefully towards that. And that's what the Eagles did. They decided that getting the 6th overall pick in April, and that's where they'll be in the NFL draft, was more important than getting a win and falling down to number 9. So that's where we are. And they tanked this game. The players didn't, especially the defensive side of the ball. I mean, no one let those guys in on it. And I think it was apropos of Jim Schwartz, because throughout his 5 years here, I think he's often put out a product that was greater than the sum of his parts. And look, they lost Jalen Mills and Nikel Roby-Coleman to the COVID list this week. Michael Jacquet was a late scratch because of an injury. He had 2 cornerbacks. He had to play Rudy Ford, an outside cornerback who's a safety and a special teams player. And this defense showed up, and they would not let Washington run away in this game. They only gave up 248 yards. They had 2 turnovers. They could have had more. There was that fumble the Eagles didn't challenge. That was potentially a touchdown going the other way. It was hard to see, but the Eagles never challenged it. And then there were a couple other fumbles they weren't able to get on. But overall, they didn't tank. But the goal of Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, and Doug Pederson was that number 6 overall pick in the NFL draft. And some fans like that. And some fans obviously don't.
John, do you believe that Howie, Jeffrey Lurie, and Doug collectively were on that same page?
Oh yeah, no question. I don't think there's any question about that. That's the first plan. That's the first bullet point. I'm going to be writing that on Sports Illustrated. I'll be writing in Philly Boys tomorrow. That's the first bullet point of the 2021 plan, is to get as high in that top 10 as you could, and it ended up being number 6, as opposed, as I said, to being number 9. I don't necessarily agree with that, and we'll see how it shakes out. But Um, this is not a league, and we're in Philadelphia, so we can look at what the 76ers did. And by the way, Krause, this is much different. This is one game. And yes, the Eagles had a plan, and Jalen Hurts admitted this to me just a few minutes ago on Zoom. The plan was for Nate Sudfeld to come in. It wasn't changed because of ineffectiveness or anything of that nature, if anyone even wants to go down that road. That was the plan, to eventually go to Nate Sudfeld. And look, you're not trying to win a football game if you're doing that. And the Eagles can talk about evaluation. You're not going to evaluate a veteran backup quarterback that you don't want to play anyway. You're just trying to get through this game. And I often talk about, management tanks. Players don't. Players didn't tank. The players are out there playing as hard as they can. But the Eagles didn't play their best players for 60 minutes, and that's sort of how you go about tanking.
NFL insider John McMullen across the Jacob Media Network. Subscribe to his podcast, listen to him, and hear him all week. Johnny Mac, the other story that was bubbling over leading into the prime time game that was flexed by the National Football League on Monday or Tuesday of last week to put us in this position was Carson Wentz. And I don't know what this speculation means. His relationship with Doug Pederson is fractured beyond repair. I don't even know how that can happen, but that report was out there. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at this stage you have to understand how these things get out there, Krause. It's obviously agent-driven, and that's, sort of what they want to move in that direction. There's no question. I mean, Carson Wentz is upset with the organization. Nobody likes to be benched, certainly. And there is probably a little bit of a disconnect with that relationship because Doug is the one who benched him. Although I would argue, and I've said on this show and other platforms we have, that Carson played so poorly he benched himself. But I put it, I laugh at that too. And it was Chris Mortensen who's very plugged in. And the report is correct. As I said, it's agent driven. Carson certainly wants to generate a trade and start anew somewhere else. But, if you fracture a bone, fracture anything, well, what do? You repair it. Something, can be repaired, and it definitely has to be repaired. But it's certainly possible. And I certainly think if you're going to ask me today, I think it's more likely than not because of the contract issues, because of the dead money issues, that still Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts are going to be there. But there's no doubt, be here with the Eagles, but there's no doubt that Doug Pederson has to repair some relationships and has to soothe some ego. And that's part of the job. I would argue that's been the strength of Doug Pederson as a head coach, managing personalities and getting past these hiccups. But he's definitely got some work to do.
Oh, boy. Johnny Mac. Do you or have you seen enough of Jalen Hurts in the 3 games and 3 quarters that he played to even go there? To even consider the possibility that Carson Wentz will be traded?
Well, I think if Carson is to be traded, I don't think it has that much to do with Jalen Hurts. I do think that Jalen Hurts, and I'm talking about now, he's proven that he's got a chance, an opportunity to be a starting level quarterback in the NFL. I think he has shown enough to say he could develop and be that type of player down the line. This is still a very small sample size, and I think you've seen it get progressively worse, and that tends to happen. I mean, that first game, nobody has any pro film on them. They're a little bit surprised. And as you move on from there, things get a little bit more difficult, a little bit more difficult, and a little bit more difficult. If you look at the box score today, it reads 7 of 20 for 72 yards and a passer rating of 25. So that's not good. But you would also look at, what was he able to do with his legs? He was able to score the 2 touchdowns. He was able to extend plays. He had Quez Watkins open by extending the play. Cheap plug for the show, Grousey.
I love it, Johnny.
And he should have hit him for a touchdown. So he's capable of doing those types of things, and that's all positive. But no, I don't think if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you sit here today and say, well, this guy's a starting quarterback. I don't think they can afford to do that going into 2021. And that's why, hey, they have a lot of decisions to make. And it's, as I said, it's already started with Jim Schwartz. It's not going to let his contract expire, so you're going to have a new defensive coordinator. They've made the decision on Doug. He's going to be back unless something really goes wrong on Tuesday when he meets with Jeffrey Lurie. Howie's going to be back. There's going to be significant changes on the coaching staff as a whole. And then you got to fix this Carson Wentz thing, and you got to fix it by either trading him or fix it by repairing the relationship. But it can't go forward as it is right now. And it was interesting, I tweeted out just before we started this show, Jason Kelsey, Zach Ertz, and Carson Wentz were sitting by themselves on a darkened Lincoln Financial Field, just talking about things. And might be the last time we see Zach. I would say is the last time we're going to see Zach Ertz as a Philadelphia Eagle. And perhaps Jason Kelsey, that would be retirement. And perhaps Carson Wentz, that would be trade.
John, do you think Doug Peterson embarrassed the franchise in prime time tonight?
Well, I think he embarrassed part of the fan base that doesn't like just giving up games. I think that's fair to say. But I do think there's another segment that thinks he did the right thing. I certainly don't think he embarrassed the organization because the organization's on board. By that, I mean Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. I mean, they're on board with this. They want that number 6 pick versus the number 9. I mean, as far as, finishing 5-10-1 versus 4-11-1, I don't think it matters that much to them. And that's, I think, look, let's be honest. It's a newer generation. Things have changed a little bit, and now people look at this type of thing as strategy more than an old school thought of trying to win at all costs. And what I mentioned Jason Kelsey spoke about a couple of weeks ago. They don't think it'll affect the culture of this organization. I tend to agree with them because a new breed of player is not going to care about something like that.
NFL insider John McMullen, last 2 minutes before we check off on the Eagles post-game show across the Jacob Media Network. John, I'm going to give out your game ball, and then I'll give you the final 2 minutes to refute the decision and or perhaps agree with the decision. We've talked about this player on this program a few times in the post-game show. I'm giving your game ball to Alex Singleton. J-Mac, he played to the very end, and man, I love watching him out there every snap.
Yeah, that's exactly who I was going to give it to. It had to be on the defensive side of the ball because those guys showed up as a whole and really fought. And there was tremendous attrition, especially in the secondary, as I mentioned. But, yeah, Alex Singleton has really developed and come out of nowhere as a special teams player. But he had 14 tackles today at a sack. He leads the Eagles in tackles, and he really only started for the last, I think, 11 games. So you can imagine what he was able to do. And by the way, every tackle he gets, he donates to charity. So, he's sort of and I tweeted out early in the game. It's obviously been a very disappointing season for the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you're looking for one thing to make you smile and think positive about Alex Singleton, his development as a player, and plus what he does off the field, as far as helping a lot of charities and his sister in the Special Olympics. He's just a great guy to go along with it, and that's what you always want. I mean, when you have a good player and they're great off the field, it's kind of a home run.
NFL insider John McMullen joining us for his Eagles post-game. First reaction from down at the link. The end of the season concludes with an embarrassment to the fan base, perhaps. Great stuff, Johnny Mac. We'll see you all week. Jody Mack on WIP, Philly Voice, Sports Illustrated, and across AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Good stuff, Johnny Mac.
All right, thanks, Krause. We appreciate it.